In 1880, the London and North Western Railway wanted to increase the number of lines from 1 to 4 on the main line between Huddersfield and Stalebridge in order to meet growing demands. However, only 2 lines could be fit between the sections between Diggle and Stalebridge. So in 1881, work began on what's known now as the Micklehurst Loop, running on the opposite side of the Tame Valley, which was completed in 1886. The loop line also included the construction of 4 new stations, one of which was at the village of Friezland, opened in July of 1886. This station was connected to the loop by 2 viaducts on either side. The Greenfield Viaduct to its northeastern approach was a 16-arch structure measuring 242 yards long. And the Friezland Viaduct to its southwest, this was 187 yards long and had 12 brick arches. Past this viaduct sits Friesland's signal box and goods yard. All of this was still under the control of the London and North Western Railway, running into 1909. On the 10th of August 1909, the 9:20 a.m. express train from Huddersfield to Stockport departed Huddersfield 2 minutes behind schedule. The express was being pulled behind locomotive number 1608, an 062 tank engine commonly known as a Webb coal tank, of which 300 were built. 1608 was described as a pet engine, a reliable locomotive that drivers at Huddersfield sheds enjoyed operating and would ask for when possible. The train consisted of the engine and 3 carriages with a combined weight of 107 tons, with a driver, a fireman, 18 passengers and a guard on board. The train ran non-stop into the Micklehurst Loop and approached Friezland Station at approximately 9:40 a.m. According to the train's guard, Joseph Pemberton, the train passed through the station at an estimated speed of about 50 miles per hour. Trouble began when they started to cross the Friezland Viaduct, as one part of the train became derailed. Guard Pemberton first knew of this when his carriage, the rearmost one, started to oscillate. Looking out of his left-hand window, he saw that the second carriage ahead of him was also oscillating more than his. He left the window and applied both the vacuum and his handbrake, but the engine in the front was still appeared to be in steam. As the train left the viaduct, Pemberton looked out of his window again and could see that the carriage ahead of him was now derailed towards the outside curve. However, he couldn't see from his angle the locomotive or the first carriage. He raced back to his handbrake and held onto it. What happened next is a little confused, but it appears that the locomotive had derailed completely and fallen onto its right-hand side, landing on the siding of the upcoming goods yard. Ripping up the rails, the locomotive dug into the ballast and track with enough force that the locomotive, which had been travelling chimney first, flipped nearly 180 degrees to face bunker first, and re-righted itself back onto its wheels, coming to rest 135 yards from the end of the viaduct. The first carriage pushed past the locomotive and ended up on the down line. Thankfully, it remained upright. The last 2 carriages piled up behind the locomotive, off the rails, but also remained upright. Guard Pemberton, despite his injuries sustained during the accident, went through the 3 carriages and checked on his passengers. Of the 18 passengers, 13 had sustained injuries, but all were able to continue their journeys later that day. Pemberton then discovered the crew of 1608 outside their cab as other railway workers from the goods yard arrived to help. He found fireman James Oates lying unconscious with his head against the rail with grievous wounds from which he would not survive. Then he found driver William Turton nearby with his head on his chest. He was dead. Guard Pemberton then proceeded to the signal box to block the lines and call for further assistance. An investigation into the cause of the derailment by Lieutenant Colonel von Donop was published in October of 1909. He ruled out that the accident was caused by a defect in the track, which was found to have been in excellent condition. Also, due to the damage sustained during the derailment, it wasn't possible to ascertain whether or not a defect had been present on the locomotive before the incident. He then turned to the locomotive's speed. While guard Pemberton and various other staff estimated his train speed to be around 45 to 50 miles an hour, Dunlop calculated the train was travelling at no less than 60 miles an hour. This was within the speed limit of the line, but was unsuitable for this locomotive. Web coal tanks were not designed for express passenger work, and had relatively small driving wheels at 5 foot and 2.5 inches, leading to greater oscillation at higher speeds. Tank engines are also more susceptible to rolling at higher speeds, due to their higher centre of gravity. These factors combined with the downhill bend of the line caused the leading wheels of the engine to have climbed out of the rails and was the probable cause of the derailment. It should be noted, however, that not everybody was in agreement that it was the locomotive that had derailed first. Locomotive foreman at Huddersfield Sheds, James Golding, stated in his evidence, "I have been around and examined the locomotive since the accident. I could find nothing in the state of the engine to account for the derailment. I think myself that the second coach came off the rails first. I formed this opinion because I have heard it said that the second coach was seen jumping, and I think if the leading wheels of the engine had come off on the viaduct, it would have gone through the wall." Ultimately, the only two men who could say for sure perished that day. The Micklehurst Loop would lose its passenger traffic by 1917. Then the line was closed completely in 1965, with the viaducts being demolished in the 1970s.